All right. Some of you are kind of getting into that. Sounded like, all right. Well, you know what? That's a song. It's an interesting song because there are a lot of people who have debated kind of down through the years, is that a Christian song or isn't that a Christian song? And obviously you heard some lyrics that sound kind of Christian to be sure. If you dig deeper into the song, there are some lyrics that you might say, well, maybe it's Christian, but it's bad theology. And it's an interesting song in that regard. You're not going to be finding it in any Pathway playlists or set lists in worship anytime soon, so don't worry about that if that one concerns you. But it's an interesting song, Spirit in the Sky. It was written and sung, the voice you were just hearing is a guy named Norman Greenbaum. Norman Greenbaum is his name. He was inspired to write that song from a greeting card he saw. And it took him 15 minutes to write it. 15 minutes to write the whole song. It was written, performed, came out in 1969, 56 years ago, but I'm guessing that all of you know it, in part because it rose quickly to the top of the Billboard charts, and some of you were around back then to enjoy it back then, but also because, and for all the rest of you who are not quite that old, because it's been featured in 60-plus movies. That song shown up in 60-plus movies down through the years. Interesting to be sure. It was a huge hit for Mr. Greenbaum, though none of his other songs came to the place where it achieved anywhere near that sort of success. Not even his, and I'm not making this up, not even his song, The Eggplant That Ate Chicago. Not making that. How many of you have heard the song, The Eggplant That Ate Chicago? All right. You can go get on Spotify later on. You can listen to that. It's really one of his songs. How could it be that that one wasn't a huge hit, right? Well, it wasn't. He had just had the one, and so he is one of our classic one-hit wonders that we are thinking about, talking about here in this series. Mind-boggling that that other one didn't make it, one-hit wonder, but the fact of the matter is that even though it was just one hit that he had, it had huge influence, in part because it was in 60-plus movies. It's been in more than 30 commercials and dozens of other shows that it has been featured in. He had amazing influence with that one song. And in this present sermon series, we're kind of taking off on that one-hit wonder idea and talking about one-chapter wonders. That's what we're calling this series. A one-chapter wonder is a book of the Bible that only has one chapter, and there are 5 of them, and this whole series is about looking at each of those 5. And we've been making our way along in this, and we've covered 3 of them already. Those are Obadiah. It's the only one in the Old Testament. We looked at Philemon, and last week we looked at 2 John, and today we're looking at 3 John. 3 John. 3 John is actually the shortest of all of the one-chapter wonders. Now, it has more verses than 2 John, but it has fewer words in the original language. So go ahead and turn to 3 John. If you find Revelation right at the very end of the Bible, you will just go back a couple of books, and there is this tiny little book right there. And while you are finding your way there, welcome everybody. Good to see all of you. Good to be together, whether you're here in the room with me, whether you're online, whether you're in the Moon campus or on the classic venue, wherever you're checking this out. Good to be together. This 3 John book is written by the man whose name it bears. It was written by the Apostle John. He was a disciple of Jesus. He was a very close relationship he had with Jesus, and many things that they ended up actually doing together. You read the Gospel of John, this is the same guy. And he's the same guy we talked about last week who opened up 2 John in the same way he opens this. Not the typical way that you would just come right out and say your name as identifying yourself as the author. He says instead right there at the beginning of this letter, if you look at it, he just says, the elder. That's how he identifies himself, just as the elder. Now, it could be a nod to the fact that he is at the end stage of his life, and he is elderly, but more likely, as we pointed out last week, he's just indicating the fact that he has apostolic authority. And so as he writes this, it is a letter that should be received by the people that he is writing to. So who's he writing to? Well, he goes on to tell us, as verse 1 goes on, says this, the elder, to my dear friend Gaius, whom I love in the truth. Now, we don't know a whole lot about this guy Gaius other than what we can glean right out of this letter itself as it's written to him, but it paints a very positive picture of him. Positive picture of who he is, of his faithfulness to God, his service to the people. He is a guy who is a leader there in this church in the first century. Probably the church in this particular location was meeting in his house. A very important person in the flow of the gospel there at this time and in this place. Gaius is one of three people who are mentioned very prominently in this letter. And if the truth be told, which is what we're talking about here today, it's what the name of this sermon is. If the truth be told, that should guide us. What we see in their lives ought to tell us something about what was going on in that context, but also inform us about what we might be able to glean out of this, what truths there are that we can take and apply into our own lives. And that's what we're going to be digging into. There are a few of them that I want to highlight for you. If the truth be told, we learn that, first of all, faithfulness inspires. Faithfulness inspires, therefore, your outline. There's no doubt that John feels very warmly toward this guy Gaius. In verse 1, he talks about him. He calls him his dear friend. In verse 2, we see it again, dear friend. Verse 5, dear friend. Verse 11, dear friend. He keeps coming back to it over and over again. And if just those names or that little introduction to each of those paragraphs isn't enough, he goes on and just lays it out here. Verse 2, he goes on to say, dear friend, I pray that you may enjoy good health and that all may go well with you, even as your soul is getting along well. This is interesting. John is clearly moved by the faithfulness of this guy, Gaius. He says, I know that even your soul is doing well, which is an interesting thing to say. And then he says, I hope that you're physically doing as well as your soul's doing, which got me to thinking, this is interesting. What would your physical condition be if it mirrored your spiritual condition? Just think about that for a minute. If your physical condition was an exact representation of the health of your spiritual circumstance, what would your physical condition be? Would you be like thriving and scaling mountains? Would you be limping around? Would you be on your deathbed? I mean, seriously, answer that question for yourself. What would your physical condition be if it were an exact representation of what your spiritual condition is? I think it's a helpful thought, a way to go ahead and try to assess exactly where it is that you are. John is saying that Gaius would be doing very well physically if it were the same as the condition of his soul. And John isn't the only one who's recognized it. Verse 3, it gave me great joy when some believers came and testified about your faithfulness to the truth, telling how you continue to walk in it. I have no greater joy than to hear that my children are walking in the truth. Obviously, there is a natural joy that comes when you hear a good word about somebody who's close to you, right? Maybe your kids. If somebody comes up to you and says something good about your kids, it's like you get great joy in that. Maybe it's your spouse. Maybe it's somebody that you have a close association with, maybe at work or somewhere else. Not too long ago, I had someone come up to me, and they had a good word to say about Pastor Ben. They said, man, he is really amazing. And I said, we're talking about Ben Marshall, right? No, I didn't say that. I didn't say that at all, because he does amazing things. He is an amazing pastor here at Pathway, and we're very thankful for that. But I got to tell you, I found joy in it when I heard it said, when I heard it spoken. That's what John is saying here. Same thing I have with you guys also. I'll be out in the community. I'll be telling somebody about Pathway, and they'll say, oh, I know that church because I know this person who goes there, and they're so caring, and they're so loving. You have great people at that church, and they're right. And I take great joy in that. And that's exactly what John is getting at here as well. He's gotten word about the faithfulness of Gaius, and he's inspired about that. This is one of those situations where like inspires like. What I mean by that is you have faithfulness that is being demonstrated on the part of Gaius, and John is celebrating that, but it stirs up additional faithfulness. Because it helps other people to know that I'm not in this alone, that there are other people who are walking this road with me. There are other people who are pulling the load. There are other people who are all in. And so that faithfulness on the part of one person stirs up the faithfulness in another person. And we've experienced that. But when that happens, what we start to see are opportunities instead of obstacles. We don't see that all of the challenges that there are to doing some sort of ministry. We see there's a possibility here. We can go and we can take this hill. We can do something that's awesome for the sake of Jesus Christ. And the thing that spurs us on is the fact that we see somebody else who's walking together with us. This is why it's so important. It's not just you that is seeking to serve God faithfully for your own sake. It inspires me when I see it. Faithfulness inspires. That's what John is saying. It's what he sees in Gaius, and it's what happens for the rest of us as well. So walk in faithfulness, and you'll be stirring up people around you, and it'll be a benefit there on top of the benefit that is just yours by living faithfully according to what the Lord calls us to. And you can walk in faithfulness in many different ways. You can do it by getting connected in fellowship. You can do it by serving, by stepping up and getting involved in serving and in giving and in caring and supporting and pulling together in unity. Sometimes you might wonder just how big of a difference you can really make on your own. It's like, well, I'm just one little person or doing one little thing in this sea of people that is Pathway. It wouldn't really matter if I was there or if I wasn't there, but that's not true. That's not true at all. Not at all. You might feel like it's just a small step of service, but that can actually provide a wave of encouragement. It was just this last week. We were sitting in staff meeting, a bunch of us sitting around the table. We're talking, and one of them was sharing a little bit of a report, and they talked about someone. In this particular case, it was one of the college students who has come back recently and has, just gotten involved in school again. And it was one of the college students who had volunteered to serve in one of the different areas of ministry. And all of a sudden, like popcorn around the table. It's like, that's awesome. That's so cool. It's so good to have the college kids back and so on. And it stirred everybody up in the room about what sounds like just one little person who just volunteered for one little thing. But it was so much more than that. It made a difference for all of us, and it inspired all of us as we thought about it. So thank goodness for that. Thank goodness for college students. We are glad to have them back, whether they're back because school is now in session, or whether you're one of our students who might be here all year round. Either way, that's awesome. And step up and keep going and keep serving. And maybe you haven't been engaged in serving, and it's time to step into service. And don't use the excuses, or don't fall into that trap of, well, I'll do it when, right? I'll do it when I'm out of school. I'll do it when I have more time. I'll do it when I get a spouse. I've heard all of these, but that's just wrong thinking, because actually there's nothing more attractive than serving. There's not. So if you want to get married, volunteer. It's like a one-to-one correlation. Now I'm teasing a little bit, but actually there is some science behind it, that people who volunteer, there are special things that happen in their lives, including living longer and other stuff on top of that as well. So I'm only kind of teasing you a little bit. And it's not just the college crowd. There's some of the rest of us who are here, who it's time to get involved. It's time to get engaged. It's time to step up. It's time to be part of that which is causing this momentum effect to happen, where faithfulness builds faithfulness. Instead of there being some who are involved and looking around, it's like, why aren't all these other people doing something? And that's the negative effect. That's what kills momentum. It's time for all of us to step up, because there's enough work for all of us to do in accomplishing the purposes that God has in store for us. Imagine struggling to figure out what we're going to do with all of the volunteers who stepped up. Imagine the things that we could do that we don't even dream of doing right now because we don't have the resource. Truth of the matter is that faithfulness inspires. And John's inspired because of this guy Gaius. And if the truth be told, there's more to it than that. And it's what we see as we go on. It's secondly, that partnership enables. John has more words of commendation for Gaius as he goes on. Verse 5, "Dear friend, you are faithful in what you are doing for the brothers and sisters, even though they are strangers to you. They have told the church about your love. Please send them on their way in a manner that honors God." The faithfulness that Gaius is expressing here wasn't just known to John, it's known to the whole church. And it's not because Gaius is walking around saying, well, look at me, look what I'm doing. It's not at all. He's just faithfully serving. And his kindness and his generosity, it just became known. It couldn't be hidden, actually, because it was blessing the people who were present. So, of course, they're going to see it and know it. Also, it's talking about here that there's some people who were traveling around at that time, like missionaries, like itinerant ministers. They were going from one city to the next, and they were doing the work that God had called them to do. They're sharing the gospel, and they needed a place to stay. And since Tom Bodette wasn't there leaving the light on for them, they had to find somewhere to stay, and the other inns that were present there in that particular day, they didn't have the spectacular reputation that Motel 6 has today. Not at all. It's not a place you would want. So this ministry of hospitality was important. And Gaius is providing it. And he says, even people who are strangers, John is celebrating, even people who are strangers, you welcomed in for the sake of advancing the cause, for the sake of partnering together. And when we do, when there's partnership, it enables, is what he is saying. And Gaius had that ministry, and the word got out. In part, it got to John because some of these traveling ministers kept traveling and showed up where John was. And they're giving this testimony about this guy Gaius, back in the place that they just came from, how much he ministered to them, and how much difference he made in the partnership that he shared with them through what he did. He continues on, verse 7. It was for the sake of the name, God's glory is what that means, that they went out, receiving no help from the pagans. We ought therefore to show hospitality to such people so that we may work together for the truth. John says they're not receiving any help from the people who aren't believers, but he's not calling out those believers or those non-believers. It wasn't their responsibility to support the missionaries. But it is the church's responsibility. It is the believer's responsibility. I know we can't all go and become full-time missionaries and go to the other side of the globe and quit our jobs here and go. We can't all do that, but we can all support those who do. We can all be a part of that support structure. We can partner together with them to enable them to go and do the work that God has called them to do. And when we do, verse 8 says here that we're working together for the truth. That's what he wants us to understand. Pathway has a lot of different missionaries, different ministries that we support, some of them very close to here, some of them, across our region or across our nation, some of them on the other side of the earth. And we step in, we support those, and when you support the ministry of Pathway, you are directly supporting those people as well in the work that they're doing, and you can know that you have a hand in that. And it's a beautiful thing to know and to understand that we're a part of their work. Now understand that this isn't only about supporting missionaries. This is about supporting the work of the Lord. It's about supporting the gospel wherever it goes out and however it goes out. To stand in the gap, to resource ministry, to get it done, because the truth of the matter is, the only way that we get ministry done here is you step up and support the work. That's our funding stream. It's the faithfulness of God's people, and I'm so appreciative to you for the way that you do step up and the way that you support the work that is being done, so that when you go to something like our Lakeside service and you hear these amazing testimonies being spoken, you can know that you had a hand in that. And when you see dozens of baptisms taking place, that your generosity, your partnership made a difference. It enabled ministry that touched lives. And when you see hundreds of kids running around here, or youth that are getting connected to fellowship and to the Lord and overcoming some of the challenges that exist for youth all around us today in our culture, you can know that you're making that difference, that you're playing a part. And it's beautiful. And just as John wants to pat Gaius on the back, I want to celebrate you for your faithfulness and also spur you on to keep on. Or maybe for some of you, to get engaged for the first time, really, in being a part of resourcing, of partnering to make these things happen. There's no place for any of us on the sideline. If you're a believer in Jesus and you're a part of this fellowship, this is what he calls us to. It'd be really nice if you'd consider that. This is what his call is on us, to live obediently, to be a Gaius ourselves, to inspire, to enable, ministry to go forward. And just as it isn't a people resource, it isn't a financial resource. That there are needs to support and go and do. And again, I just dream of this day when it's like, would you please stop giving because we don't know what to do with all the money we've got? And that's exactly what would quite likely happen if we would just all get to the place where God is calling us to be. It's important. Why? Because partnership enables. It makes ministry happen. It gets the gospel to go out. It helps us to fulfill our purpose, which is to be and make disciples of Jesus Christ, to see people come to faith in Jesus, that their eternity might be changed, and to help them grow deeply in that faith. If the truth be told, partnership enables. Then one more thing that we take out of this one chapter wonder. If the truth be told, discernment protects. Discernment protects. Unfortunately, not everybody in this letter is a person of exemplary character like Gaius, verse 9. I wrote to the church, but Diotrephes, who loves to be first, will not welcome us. Diotrephes, this guy he's talking about, was a man who probably had some sort of position in the church, but he was abusing it. John says he loves to be first. He's saying it's a man full of pride. It's a man who wants to make it about himself, about getting other people to serve him and his purposes rather than God and God's purposes for that church. He was controlling, dismissive of apostolic authority. John says he won't listen to us. He won't receive us. Calls him out, says the servant heart is not in him. Verse 10 then fleshes out some of his behavior even more in John's intended response to it. So when I come, I will call attention to what he is doing, spreading malicious nonsense about us. Not satisfied with that, he even refuses to welcome other believers. He also stops those who want to do so and puts them out of the church. This guy is a big problem. He's spreading false information. He is telling lies about John and about others who were serving kingdom purposes in the church and beyond. And he's refusing to welcome these traveling missionaries and teachers and gospel preachers. He's refusing them and probably standing in Gaius' way. Remember, Gaius is the guy who welcomes in the strangers. He's the one who welcomes them to his house, helps to promote their ministry. Well, Diotrephes is standing against it. Probably standing against Gaius, making it difficult for him to do what the Lord had called him to do. He was even going so far as to take those who were following John's call, following Gaius' example, serving well other people, and he's kicking them out of the church. That's what's going on here that he's talking about. It's ludicrous. And John says there's no place for it. And he says, I'm going to deal with that when I come. Because it shouldn't continue. Friend, it's important that we would protect against those who would undermine the people of the church, the purpose of the church, and the work that we're called to do. There's enough opposition for the church from those that come from the outside, from the culture that would beat against the message of the Bible and the message of the church. We need to be unified here together on the inside. And just as pride and slander was standing in the way of the work of the church in the first century that John is telling us about here, it'll stand in the way and does stand in the way of the work of the church in the 21st century as well. And we need to be as serious about it as John is. He continues in verse 11, dear friend, do not imitate what is evil, but what is good. In other words, don't follow after Diotrephes. Anyone who does what is good is from God. Anyone who does what is evil has not seen God. John knows the impact of Gaius' life and ministry, and he's calling him to stand strong and to not shrink back in the face of this opposition, saying, don't get discouraged. God is on your side. God is working his purposes for good, and he's going to see them through. So even though there are these evil influences, stand against them so that they would not gain a foothold, so that they would not have their influence. And he goes on to show Gaius that he's not alone. Verse 12, Demetrius is well spoken of by everyone, and even by the truth itself. In other words, his life lines up with the truth of God. We also speak well of him, and you know that our testimony is true. Demetrius, clearly a godly man, one to emulate, to respect. He's the opposite of Diotrephes. Instead of being arrogant, he's humble. Instead of demanding honor and authority be given to him, that he's the one who would be lifted up, he just serves humbly. And what happens is that he's honored, not because he's asking for it or demanding. In fact, it looks like he's kind of trying to push it away, but it just happens because his life is so exemplary. Because he has a sterling reputation. It's not too hard to figure out who you should follow after here at the end of 3 John, is it? Demetrius all the way. But we need to be discerning if we're going to protect ourselves against this Diotrephes sort of spirit that would work against the leading of the Spirit. We need to be open-eyed. We need to be looking at circumstances. We need to discern what it is that we see, what it is that we hear, the influences that we might see present, so that we would not fall into the trap of allowing a Diotrephes to gain some sort of control. And with those critical points laid out, John starts to bring the letter to a close. Verse 13, I have much to write you, but I do not want to do so with pen and ink. I hope to see you soon, and we will talk face to face. You know, it'll be fascinating to know what John has on his mind, that he is saying, I've got a lot to talk to you about, but I'm not going to write it down now. We'll just talk about it when I get there. I'm going to save it for later. Now, I got to tell you, that would never fly at my house. I couldn't go to Carolyn and say, you know what, I've got something important that I want to talk to you about, but we'll talk about it another time. She'd be like, no, we're going to talk about it now. Tell me what it is that you have in mind. Tell me now. I don't want to wait till later. I want to know now. And I've learned that refusing that is futile, so I just tell her. And that's the way that it should be. Well, that's not what he does. John can get away with it. And he does get away with it. He said, I've got a lot to tell you, but we're going to hang on to that for later. What we do know, not what he's thinking, what we do know is what he considers so important that he's got to say it now. He's got to write it. It can't wait. And what he has to say, if the truth be told, is that faithfulness inspires, that partnership enables, and that discernment protects. To sum up this letter, that's what he's saying. That's what he wants us to know. That's what he wants us to understand. Then he signs off with this greeting, verse 15, peace to you. The friends here send their greetings. Greet the friends there by name. If the truth be told, this one chapter speaks volumes. Volumes. It shows us the way to live and interact with one another in friendship, in relationship, in the church. It tells us how to participate in the work of the Lord and what to stand against. And as we do so, the church will thrive, relationships will blossom, and God will be honored. Friends, let's be that church. Let's listen to the warning that he gives. Let's look at the flags that he raises and says, here's where the dangers come from. Protect yourself. Be discerning. Understand. Stand against those Diotrephes sort of influences. And at the same time, the emphasis he gives is to jump in, get involved, get engaged, serve, give, support, care, so that we might see the life of Gaius, that we might live accordingly, and that we might see all of the blessing that comes through it be a blessing that falls here. So what's the step that you need to take? Is it getting connected? Is it getting engaged? Is it stepping up? Is it serving? Is it giving? Is it supporting? Is it caring? Is it going? What is it that God would be calling you to, that we might take the example of Gaius and make it that which could be spoken about us? Whatever it is, friend, don't put it aside. Don't say, oh, that was a good message. It's good to know more about 3 John. This is here as a one-chapter wonder to get our attention. He's not going on to say a bunch of other stuff. This is what he wants to say. The whole letter, because he wants us to learn it. and he wants us to live it. If the truth be told, this is absolutely essential. Let's be that church. Heavenly Father, thank you for the life of Gaius, one who certainly deserves to be lifted up and celebrated and held up as an example for all of us. Lord, I pray that we would take this to heart, that we would recognize that this is a call on us. And if the truth would be told about who we are, we can examine our lives accordingly as to how it stacks up against the faithfulness we see here, about the partnership that we see being lived out. Father, I pray that you would work in us accordingly. I pray that you would convict us accordingly. I pray that we'd be people who can't just set it aside, but that we'd be evaluating, what does this require of me? And that we'd step into it, and that we'd do it, and that we'd live it. Father, thank you that you are desiring us to be the people you desire us to be. And we understand that it's living in conformity with that purpose that really gets us to the place where life takes on meaning and fulfillment. It may sound like a lot to do, but it's the very thing that puts us in the place where we'll experience the greatest joy and also lead others to experience the greatest joy as we live out our faithfulness, because faithfulness inspires and partnership enables. So Lord, make us discerning, make us committed to be those people living those lives ultimately toward the end of your glory. We pray toward that end now. In Jesus' name, amen.